Hola and welcome to That Eurovision Podcast, Eurovision with a slice of life. My name is Jazzi and I am doing very well today. Been out and about all day, although it was very cold when I got back to my house because I forgot to put the heating on. So before this podcast, I was all wrapped up in bed trying to get the heating to kick in. Anyway, it's been a bit crazy being able to go out and about during national final season when we have been so busy, and it's so nice to be able to bring a podcast episode to you. Anyway, joining me today is
Hi, it's Rosie. Feels like it's been quite a long time since I've done one of these. I'm very excited to be back. I am slightly overwhelmed from following everything or trying to keep up with as much as I possibly can in national final season and live a life. I'm not necessarily sure the two are compatible things, but we're doing our best here. And I am very excited to decompress from, at the time of recording, last night, and to talk a little bit about one of the countries that has just chosen their Eurovision entry for 2022.
Hello, it's Isabelle here, back again. I just can't stay away. I'm doing great, actually. I've had a ball of a week. It's been so much fun really getting into national finals. We're getting into the thick of it now. We're having, weekends of like multiple national final shows. I've had an absolute blast this week, particularly because of Benidorm Fest, which we'll be talking about later, I'm sure. It's just been an absolute joy getting into the shows. I think the ones I've caught have been great so far. I've had my first live tweeting experiences for That Eurovision site. So if you're not following That Euro site on Twitter, come along for the ride. We're live tweeting all the national finals that we can get our hands on. So it's been chaos, but it's been like organized chaos. And I think that's sort of what we're all here for as Euro fans, aren't we? I'm wearing black and red. I think that I've given you enough hints about what this podcast episode is going to be about. Needless to say, I'm really excited about it, given where we are in the timeline.
Isabelle, did you just say that you were along for the ride?
of your life.
I'm going to pretend I just didn't hear that, because otherwise I'd have to stop speaking to both of you.
Hi, I'm Stuart. I'm new around these parts. I'm doing great, thank you. It's the weekend, so it's a great time. And yes, I'm looking forward to discussing more about today's particular country and getting involved in the debate. So thanks for having me along.
As you will have heard during the introductions just said, Stuart is one of our few new members to the team, and we are very happy to have him on board and very happy to have him for his first podcast. Hopefully we'll get some of our other new members on soon, so we are very excited about that. Anyway, as we may have alluded to in our introductions, today we are going back to some country retrospectives, and we will be talking about Spain. Spain have just held their national final last night at the time of recording. And just a bit of background, Spain have been part of Eurovision since 1961. And since joining the contest, they have won on 2 occasions in 1968 and 1969, which was 2 years in a row. However, they've only hosted the contest once, and that was because the Netherlands went on to host in 1970. This was due to countries threatening to withdraw if Spain hosted the contest again, due to the 4-way tie, of which the Netherlands, France and the UK were also part of. We will delve into a bit more about Spain in the 60s later on in this episode, so I won't go on too much about it now. So I think the first thing that we would do, as per customary any country retrospective, is firstly go on to our favourite Spanish Eurovision songs. So what have been some of your favourite Spanish entries in the last however many years they have been in the contest? I can't do math.
For me, I feel like it's quite different talking about countries' entries that have been around since I've been watching the contest and going back to sort of years from when I was either not alive or not watching the contest or not old enough to remember anything. So I've sort of split them into two categories. From more recent years, my favourites probably are, there's actually quite a lot of them, and Spain for me is possibly one of the most underrated Big Five countries for me. I tend to find that they send songs a lot of the time that I do actually really enjoy, but that don't really tend to get the results that I feel they deserve. And there are quite a lot of entries, particularly in the 2010s, that really exemplify that for me. La Venda is possibly one of the biggest ones, an absolute joy of an entry that was done very, very dirty by both the voting and the staging, to be quite honest. Beret's Say Yay, I think, is joyful. Edurne with Amanecer is absolutely beautiful, and one that I think is possibly quite underrated because it's not one I see people talking about much is ESDM with Contigo Hasta el Final. I think it's absolutely lovely. I think the instrumental is great. It's really folky, it's quite uplifting, but it's quite subdued at the same time, and I think they give a really, really great performance. Going back to songs sort of from before my time, Spain for me had quite a golden age in the 90s. Azúcar Moreno with Bandido, absolutely iconic. Eva Santamaria with Hombres, Anabel Conde with Vuelve Conmigo, fantastic set of songs. And just from before that, the other one that I want to mention is Lucia with El, another absolutely fantastic Spanish entry that has really stood up listening to it in 2022 versus 1982.
All right. I had such a journey trying to pick my favorites from Spain because I actually don't consider it a country that I enjoy in Eurovision. I've been quite vocal before about calling it like the, you know, of the big five, it's the chaos country, right? Like each of the big five sort of fulfill a role, don't they? I mean, I always enjoy a chaos country more than like a kind of a dull country. Like if you ask me which country song I'd like to skip in a lineup without knowing what the songs are going to be, it's not going to be Spain's because I want to see what they're going to bring. It'll be the UK. I'm so sorry. But yeah, no, I'm always curious to see what Spain brings because it was interesting for me kind of going back because I'm not as familiar with the early contest as I am with the later contest. They just didn't really stand out for a very long time. To me, it seems that was also, you know, what, you know, the viewers and the juries at the time felt like, right? Like they didn't do very well until they suddenly came up and won. Then they had a bit of a golden era, right, in the 60s. And then the chaos really begins, right? In like the late 70s to the 80s, like the chaos fully, it's just unleashed. The first couple of times I was kind of, you know, going back through it, I gave myself a headache because there's just so much going on and much of it not good. I think, but I think there's a lot there that does, you know, bear repeat listening. And I actually ended up with quite a long shortlist. I'm going to try and keep this short and sweet. I've already rambled. I haven't even given you a single song yet. I literally promised this lot that I was going to like not lose my train of thought. God, it's just, yeah, there's just there's just so much happening. I'll give you my top three. And then I'll give you a few kind of other you know, honorable mentions. I absolutely love Edurne Amanecer in 2015. I think it's one of the rare occasions where I love the staging. It's incredibly dramatic, isn't it? Like she's doing so much, but I think that it works because Amanecer means dawn, and the visual is just really, I mean, it's a little bit computer screensaver, isn't it? But like in a pleasant way, like it really is this like just glowing, you know, light show. Physically she's matching it, so it's really committed, and I think most importantly her vocal is just spot on. It's such a gorgeous, beautiful, powerful yet haunting vocal that deserved so much better, as Rosie said. So that was 2015. I don't know if I mentioned that. I'm sure Rosie did anyway. A completely different vibe. I adore Bandido from 1990, Azúcar Moreno's entry. I have a real soft spot for flamenco, and it's not the first time. The first instance of Spain bringing flamenco to Eurovision was 1983, right? Remedios Amaya, Quien maneja mi barca. I just don't think it was very well executed. The jury's agreed. I think Azúcar Moreno did a gorgeous job of bringing flamenco, but making it feel accessible to maybe a listener who isn't super familiar with the style. Like, it is a very catchy hook, even though it's a very flamenco infused song. I just really love it. I go back to that. And my absolute favorite, which given the last two I've just picked might be a bit of a surprise, is 2019 Mickey La Venda. That was definitely a case of, at first I was like, this is silly. And on repeat listening and on reading the lyrics, I think it's brilliant. I think it's so good. I can't talk about Spain in Eurovision, and I particularly can't talk about Mickey in Eurovision without mentioning my wonderful Chilean friend, Fefi. So much of my thinking about Eurovision in recent years has been really kind of influenced by her. She's also a Eurovision fan, from all the way in South America. There's definitely a little contingent over there, right? And if you want to go and check her out on her socials, she's Fefi's Faces and Stories on IG. It's mostly makeup on there, and Squishy Cupcakes on Twitter. And that's actually, Twitter's where you'll get her. She's got a razor wit and she comments on all sorts of things. She's big on figure skating. I know there's a Eurovision figure skating fandom crossover sort of overlap. So if you're one of those people, then go check out Fefi. But the reason I bring her up in relation to Miki is that we spent so many hours trying to just puzzle out Miki's lyrics, because they seem like nonsense. Like, at first they seem like they make sense. And then on closer reading, they don't make any sense at all. Like, they don't make grammatical sense, right? Like, you're reading them and you're like, it's like images, but they don't make grammatical sense. But like, I feel like I've read the lyrics so much now. I'm like, I think they do make grammatical sense. I think it's just like, it's just quite strange and poetic. Anyway, I think it's got like a real protest song vibe to it. Something which, again, Fefi, brought to my attention first, but I feel that it reminds me a lot of Manu Chao and La Mano Negra, bands from a little bit further back, but that, had that same kind of uplifting, upbeat, but really quite politically scathing thing going on. So yeah, I can't get over how dirty Miki was done, because again, that's another case of the staging. I think was great for La Venda. I thought it was absolutely joyous. I don't know what they could have done differently, honestly. A few shout outs. I don't think this is a popular choice. I really like 2014 Ruth Lorenzo, Dancing in the Rain. I think that she combined the Spanish and the English parts of that song really well and organically, and I think that's something that a lot of songs in Eurovision don't do. To really kind of organically, successfully combine English with a native language. I think that song did that really well. I really just have to shout out Lydia in 1999 with No Quiero Escuchar. The dress was a hate crime. When Spain puts its acts in stripes, it's just violence. I don't know why they have ever done it. I hope they never do it again. It never works. When they do, they end up in last place. And that song is wonderful. She's wonderful. Her performance of it is gorgeous. And it just got no love. And I'm just going to blame the dress. I adore 1995 as well. Anabel Conde, Vuelve Conmigo. It's already been mentioned by Rosie. And I just feel like I just have to say that against my will, 2008, Baile el Chiqui Chiqui, it has no right being so catchy. Rudolfo Chiquilicuatre, which is not his real name, just honestly has no right to be in this list in my mouth at all, and yet here he is. It's just such a ridiculously catchy song. So I've shamed myself. I'm going to hand the mic over.
I'm just going to say I've got a really soft spot for that dress Lydia wore in 1999. It's very vibrant, isn't it? It does catch the eyes, but yeah, there was no way you could justify voting for that. You just don't listen to the song, you're just looking at the dress. For me, Spain is a country in Eurovision, in my opinion, that is either a hit or a miss in terms of entries. They're either yes, it's great, it's amazing, or it's just it passes you by, it just misses you completely. I was looking back at some of the performances, all the performances, and yeah, some of them are just complete misses and don't leave a mark. But the ones that are good are really good. So for me, the ones that I had picked out were Nina with, and I'm going to absolutely butcher the Spanish here, so I do apologize to everyone in advance. Nakada para Amar, or that's as close as I'm getting to it. But that's a brilliant song from 1989. So that's one that really sticks. I do like a ballad, and 1991 as well was another ballad by Sergio Dalmala, Balar Cados. I'm sorry if you're Spanish and listening to this. I can only apologise. But I really love that song. It's just got a really nice melody. So that's always one that sticks out to me. It did come fourth and quite a big hit for me. And then the other one that I was going to say was from 2003, Dima by Beth. Just really catchy as well. Those were the three ones that stood out. But I'm going to back you up, Isabelle, with Bala Ella Chica Chica. 2008 was like the first year that I watched as a fan, and that song I really didn't like at the time, but now anytime it comes on I just stop what I'm doing and just fully embrace it, and especially with the little like guitar he uses, it's genius. That's why I love 2008 so much. More recently, Lavender, absolutely, it had so much potential, and the Eurovision performance and their national final performance, it's like chalk and cheese, it's like day and night. And it just had so much potential. It could have done so well. I just think they overcooked the omelette. They threw the kitchen sink, and well, we all know how that ends. And it's just so unfair because it was such a good song. Going last as well, never easy. I think a lot of people pick their favourites, the general public, and maybe that was a mark against it as well as the performance. I think the national final performance, it was so fun and you just fully embrace it. So, I mean, it was perfect, it had so much potential. And I think Spain do send some of their biggest stars that are popular in Spain. It's not like they're always sending newbies. So they've got a really good backing. I just, sometimes they miss the mark with the song. I think Blas was quite a popular artist in Spain. A song that I really liked, but it was a grower. It wasn't an instant sort of thing. But yeah, from my three, I really enjoy them. But like I said, they're a hit and a miss. They've either got it spot on. I think we're going to talk about it later, but I did listen to the entry pick last night. I'm in love with her. So I'm really excited to see what they get up to this year. Perfect choice. But we'll see how it goes.
Okay. First of all, Bala El Cheeky Cheeky Love. No. No. But let's keep it positive. I think the first thing I should do is, in the 2010s, echo what everybody has said about Mickey and Lavender. For the longest time in 2019, well, until Iceland picked their entry, Hatrid Munsigra, Mickey was my winner. He is my second place now, but obviously he was my winner for a very long time in 2019 until the art came. And he's really the only entry in the 2010s that I properly love and adore. I think his stage presence is amazing. I think he's so charismatic. You just fall in love with him when he's performing. You can tell he's so happy to be on the stage. And everything about him and his performance is brilliant. I do have some criticisms about the staging. I think the national final staging for that song was perfect, and I think what Spain did is they tried to fix what wasn't broke. And I think if they'd have stuck with the national final staging, they would have done very well, because on the national final stage you just had like a band behind them and it wasn't too choreographed, and they were just like oh yay, cheering. It was all very stereotypically Spanish, but I think that really worked for the song. And I don't know, I just think that would have got them out of this bottom 5 rut they have seemed to find themselves in. I think that it would have got on the left hand side of the leaderboard. I think he did come 12th of the televoters, so the televoters definitely did give him some love, and I think if they'd have stuck with the original performance, they would have given him even more. However, I can't ramble on too much about Mickey because we have already said a lot about him already. I think some of my other favourite performances are D Nash's I Love You Mi Vida from 2007. If you saw my ESC 250 votes, I love that song. I love a boy band as much as probably a lot more than anybody on this podcast does. I think that is just like, that would just have been my type of thing in 2007. It's so nostalgic to me. I love and adore it so much. It's my winner in 2007. I actually think in the 2000 Spain, to me, were a little bit of a powerhouse. They have like a bit of a run, 2001 to 2003, where I love all their entries. Dili que la Cuego by David Ciavera. Amazing song. I think that deserved to do well. And I think it did. I think it came 6 in 2001. And I think that is very well deserved. I also love Rose's Europe's Living a Celebration. I love hearing it on Eurovision Nights Out. It's so fun. And it just makes me want to dance. And I've heard it a lot on ESC radio over lockdown, and it just put a smile on my face, and I really enjoy it. And I'm going to echo what Stuart said about Beth's Diem from 2003. I think that again is an amazing song, just a fun pop girly bop, perfect for that time, that era. I think the early 2000s is a really good era for Spain and very underrated because they have a lot of good entries in the 2000s. Going to go a little bit more into the older entries now. So there's kind of been like 3 tiers to this. I'm so sorry for going on so much. Older entries I actually quite like the winner from 1968, La 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 by Messial. I know it's shrouded in a lot of controversy, and we have a whole section on that later. So we'll probably talk a little bit more about the song there, but the song's very classy. I think it just works really, really well. I don't know if it's the best song in 1968 because I will admit I wasn't alive then, and I've not listened to all the songs from 1968. Another song I really love is Volve Conmigo by Annabel Conde, 1995. It was a very stereotypical 90s-esque ballad, but I think the ballads in the 90s are probably the strongest ballads we've ever had in the contest. It has that ethereal vibe that quite a few of the ballads had in the 90s, so it's great for the time. Another one that is just an absolute classic to me, and I think deserves so much recognition, and I think it gets it now off the fandom. I don't know if it did a few years ago, but Eres Tu by Monfecadades. Sorry, I messed that up. Stunning ballad. And I think when we were in lockdown in 2020 was when I really, really started to love this song. Like I could have even though I know a lot of the Eurovision fandom do not speak Spanish, I could imagine people standing together with this sense of togetherness singing this song. And I think I heard it a lot on ESC Radio Lives, which was kind of an initiative some Euro fans on Twitter did during lockdown, and this song came on quite a few times, and I think it just signified that togetherness for a lot of people for me, and I really, really like it now. Anyway, enough about the Spanish entries. We're going to go into maybe looking a little bit into the future. Spain haven't hosted a contest since the 60s, so that was a very long time ago. And obviously in that time, Eurovision has massively evolved into something that's totally different to what it was back then. How would you like to see Spain go about Eurovision in the modern day era if they were to win soon, if Benidorm Fest did become a success and brought them a winner?
I feel like Spain is in a very similar position to where Portugal was prior to their win. It's been such a long time that they've been waiting, but also they have such a rich musical history, such a rich identifiable culture. And I think what Portugal did in 2018 when they hosted, they really put on a show that showed off what that culture looked like, but made it so modern and fresh and vibrant and inviting and accessible. And it wasn't nationalistic in any way, but it was people who had such a pride in their heritage showing that off. And I think what I would love to see from Spain if they win is something very, very similar, something that shows off that blend of tradition with modernity, and that really shows off the uniqueness of Spanish culture and the Spanish music industry. Because I know we're going to talk a little bit about Benidorm Fest coming up, but that was such a fantastic show in terms of displaying that. And I think Spain could do something really, really special, because Spanish culture is so identifiable. There are so many elements that I think a lot of people around the world would recognize as being very uniquely Spanish. And I think that could be really exciting. I don't know if this is even possible, but even like a Spanish river dance showing off traditional Spanish music and dancing or something like that, I'd be so here for. But quite frankly, I'm just completely into river dance. So something like that really brings their tradition to the modern day.
I agree with a lot of what Rosie just said. I'll add that there are so many different, and this is something that I think that a lot of non-Spanish people don't necessarily fully grasp. I'm not saying I fully grasp it either, but I think it's something that I would love to see showcased. Yes, Spanish culture is identifiable immediately, but there are so many Spanish cultures, even just within Spain, right? And I know that we're going to touch on this when we even more, and we're going to keep coming back to it when we go to Benidorm and, you know, the acts that were there, and also the winner that we got from the, you know, southern North African influenced Andalusian stuff that is super recognizable, like flamenco, the guitar, the dance, all of that stuff, all the way up to the Celtic north, right? And then there's so much in between. There are so many languages in Spain. There are so many different cultural elements at play, which, you know, it would be fascinating to see how Spain would navigate that showcase in the modern day in a Eurovision setting. I think there would be enormous potential for it to be something so special. I think there would also be enormous potential for it to be quite tense. Spain has a little bit of a checkered history that really runs into the present of, you know, not necessarily recognizing its different cultures, its different languages. And that could be really kind of interesting in both good and bad ways to observe unfold. And then that's not even thinking about Latin America, which is a whole other category, which has been neglected by Spain largely. We have had Eurovision entries that had Latin influences, but not since, you know, not in the last 10 years, I don't think. I think you have to go back to the early noughts to get, you know, the last Latin influenced. I could be wrong, but off the top of my head, I think you have to go back to the early noughts to get the last Latin influenced Eurovision song from Spain. But either way, it's certainly not something that's been prevalent. With our song for this year, we've got a Latin influenced song from a Latin artist. So that's something that's obviously very new and very different and very exciting. I think it would be amazing. I mean, actually, just talking about it makes me really want a Spanish Eurovision, right? Like, they've been waiting, like Rosie said, they've been waiting so long. They've been waiting longer than any other Eurovision winner has at this point for a return. Seeing as Portugal got their win, they're now the longest winner with a drought. And oh wait, no, that's right, isn't it? Well, was that Portugal's first win in 2018? It was their first win in 2018. Yes. No, so Italy was the longest. Was Italy the longest drought?
Yeah, Austria.
Okay. Austria. Okay, cool. I'm so sorry.
Austria in 2014.
Thank you so much, Jazzi, with the fact check. All the Eurovision facts are just bouncing around in my head, crashing against each other in the chaos and the sleep deprivation of national final season. But either way, Spain is now the longest winner in a drought. I'd love to see that change, even though I'm French and I would love to see France end its drought. Spain kind of, you know, I don't know. I feel like Spain almost deserves it more at this point. And I'm really stoked just thinking about what a Spanish Eurovision could look like. I have a request. I fell in love with Benidorm Fest, I have to say. I hope that it comes back and keeps just getting stronger and stronger, because I thought it was brilliant. Was it chaotic at times? Absolutely. Do I expect anything less? No. But it was the good chaos. I mean, the little kind of the weird little interludes with the hosts where they just, you know, started talking about phones vibrating in their pants. I mean, there was some nonsense happening, and I supported every bit of it. I guess my request would be both like to kind of take what was good about Benidorm Fest and apply it to Eurovision. You know, obviously Eurovision's a different stage, it's a bigger stage. That DIY aesthetic won't cut it, but there was a lot that was really positive about Benidorm, and I'd love to see. It gives me hope, and it heartens me. I feel like it really shows that Spain can put on a fabulous show. I'm going to name check another friend of mine, this time an Uruguayan friend. She's shyer, so she just wants me to call her Flor, and to not plug any socials because she's shy. But she said, and I completely agree, that if Spain does end up hosting Eurovision, you know, next year or soon, we want the hosts, the Benidorm hosts back. Okay, Alaska is a queer icon. She did such a gorgeous job. I loved her chemistry with Maxim Huerta. I thought he was wonderful as well. And Inés Hernand was like exactly the chaos host. There always has to be one chaos host, right? The green room host. She's the green room host. I'd love to see that team again. I couldn't get enough of them.
I would really, really like to see Eurovision being held in Spain. So Spain have got this 52-year ongoing gap since their last hosting. A Eurovision in Spain, it could be totally different to what we've seen before, even from Portugal. And I think they could bring their own flavour. A lot has happened since they last hosted it. A lot has changed. So they've got a lot to show now. And I think when we're talking about the many different cultures in different areas of Spain, if they were able to kind of spread to cover as much of that as possible, I think there'd be so much to watch and attract people to it. Spain's quite a popular place for people to go. There's a lot of memories there as well for people. So I think that's something that would attract Spain and hosting Eurovision. Let's watch in with that. Also for Spain, they've got a really big fan base, and if they could, you know, involve them as much as possible, you know, get the different view, I think it would just be such a party atmosphere. They've got all this wide range of music as well to showcase. I love Rosie's idea of like having this interval that could kind of cover as much as possible. Yeah, get the dancing in there and get different music. I think if they did a Eurovision that was as much as Spanish as possible, given this Mediterranean flavour, I think it would be absolutely ideal. So fingers crossed that they're going to get hits, and then win at some point. We'd love to see it.
I think I've kept my points really short and sweet about how I would feel about like a Spanish Eurovision. I imagine a Spanish Eurovision just being a big, massive party, but at the same time, like keeping some class and sophistication within the hosting and within the venue. I think they can mix up the fun and the classiness of Spain together, and I think that would be a really fun, like I feel like they would bring the party to Europe if they were to win Eurovision and host it. And I think, again, they have such a mix of cultures within the country. It'd be very interesting to see where would host it, because there's so many possibilities. I think also something that I would like to see, that I think Spain is one of those countries that could possibly bring this, is I think a lot of the stagings and a lot of the graphics, like in past years, have been quite dark. Spain have like a red and yellow flag, so possibly we'll get some lighter staging, lighter graphics. And this is just from a personal thing where we've had so many years of dark graphics. I think the last time we had any even warmish graphics was 2012. I just think it would be so fun, so bright, so vibrant from Spain. And yeah, it would just be really interesting. I just think it'd be so different to anything that we've had recently. So yeah, I would really welcome Spain hosting Eurovision if they were to get a winner. Who knows? Maybe it could be 2023. Okay, we're going to take a step back now again, because I know we've taken a step backwards looking at past centuries, took a step forwards, and now we're going to take another step back and talk a little bit about how Spain handled Eurovision back in the 60s. For this one, I am going to give you a little bit of a monologue here, so I do apologise, but I think it gives some background. Basically, in 1968, there was a lot of controversy about Missel and La 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 being the winner of that year, because basically in 2008, there was a documentary that came out, 1968, Yo Vivi el Medio Español, which claims that the Spanish dictator at the time, Francisco Franco, basically bribed juries and people to do a Eurovision so that Spain would win the contest with their song. This is a claim that Messiel, the artist of La La La, and the broadcasting themselves, TVE, massively deny. The author of the documentary, Jose Maria Inigo, was actually forced to apologize to the artist. So I don't know whether that brings some of those claims into retribute or this was somebody trying to damage the reputation of Spain in the contest. But I think it's also worth noting that there was a plan originally to have a different artist, Joan Manel Serrat, who wanted to sing the song in Catalan. However, due to the dictatorship, this was not allowed. And they were very clear that they wanted the song to be sung in Spanish. It's just a question, what do we make of these claims? Do we think Spain is more open to their dialects being used now? Do we think the 1968 contest was rigged? I think it's just a lot of discourse that I think would be really interesting to bring up in this episode.
It's something I was doing a little bit of reading on before we started recording this episode, because knowing about the sort of having a vague knowledge that there had been some controversy over the entry, and also knowing that Spain was a dictatorship until reasonably recently in history, I was sort of curious about how that had influenced Spain and its Eurovision participation. And I came across a really interesting paper by Juan Francisco Gutierrez Lozano, and he wrote a paper called Spain Was Not Living a Celebration, TVE and the Eurovision Song Contest During the Years of Franco's Dictatorship. And one of the things that really comes across in that is how Franco and the regime was using Spain's participation in Eurovision to present a very specific image of Spain to the rest of Europe. An image where Spain was seen as open, as inclusive, as a free country that was an international country that wanted to be seen on an international stage. And this was despite Spain living in a very undemocratic and very violent regime. I'm not going to pretend that I am an expert on Spanish history, and this is why I'm pointing you towards Lozano's paper on it, because he's coming from a country where he's actually got the knowledge of this. But I think it is fascinating that even looking back towards the 60s, when Eurovision was really still coming into its own as a contest, we still see these arguments coming back again and again today, where we're seeing countries that may not necessarily have particularly strong, human rights records or things like that, using Eurovision as an international stage to present themselves in a very particular way to, Europe and now the world as well. And it's fascinating to see that even from the very early years of the contest, it has been used in this way. So in terms of the language aspect of things, I think, first of all, I would be fascinated to hear what La 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 sounds like in Catalan, simply because I don't have a lot of exposure to the Catalan language, and I think it would be fascinating. We have also had Catalan at Eurovision before, but not from Spain. And Dora's first entry, which name I cannot remember off the top of my head now, but it was their 2004 entry, was sung in Catalan. So it shows that there is a place for these languages in Eurovision. I'm always going to be a proponent of using Eurovision to showcase minority languages. I want to see more countries showcase minority languages, the UK included, please. And I love it when entries do that. And I think, again, I am not an expert on the sort of regional independence movements in Spain at the moment, but I do wonder how something like that might influence Spain's desire as an entire country, or RTV as a broadcaster, to submit something in a language that isn't Spanish, and whether that might be a positive or a negative effect. And I think this year was a really interesting example with Tanchugueiras, which I'm sure we will discuss a little bit more later on.
Diving in here with a little fact check to make up for my previous fact flub. 2004's Andorra entry was indeed in Catalan. It was Jugarem a estimarnos, apologies, that's a Castellano accent, not not a Catalan accent. And I'd completely forgotten about that, because one of the things that was really exciting about Tanchugueiras in Benidorm Festival this year was that it would have been the first non-Castilian Spanish language song fielded by Spain for Eurovision. I mean, obviously Spain's fielded songs that are in English, or partly in English rather, right before, but other than English and Castellano, there have not been any other languages in Spain's Eurovision songs, and that's kind of stunning for a country that has so many. They're co-official languages, and they vary by region, right? So in like Catalonia, the co-official languages are Catalan and Aranese. In Valencia, there's Valencian, right? Galicia has Galician. So there are only co-official languages in those regions. I'm not sure how that would have interfaced with the. Perhaps if you're a real Eurovision boffin, you can chime in and at us over on Twitter at that Eurovision podcast. But I'm not sure how that would have interfaced with the language rule, right? Which obviously is no longer in implemented, but was very strict at various points in the past. And perhaps it's a moot point, because we already saw what went down in the 60s, and how it wasn't really even viable for a non-Castellano song, a song that wasn't either in Castellano or in English to be pitched in Eurovision by Spain. But I wonder whether a language being co-official just in one region of the country kind of counts as an official language. I'm not sure. Like, that's genuinely something that I couldn't figure out. Like, I didn't research too deeply, but Rosie knows.
I don't know. I just wanted to say that it's one of the reasons why I'm so against language rule in Eurovision, because
same.
I want countries to be sending songs in all of their languages, please.
Exactly. Yes, and that's actually I completely agree. I also do love the fact that the abolition of the language rule does give a bit more of creative reign. It's a bit depressing to me that the way it's used is primarily to just send languages in English. Like, that's kind of like, but that's the price you pay, I think. And I mean, that's not necessarily always a bad thing, right? Like, I think that a lot of there is a lot of potential for beautiful English songwriting, but I think quite often that doesn't happen, because quite often what you end up with is people whose first language isn't English, or who don't have a native English speaker on the songwriting team, bringing songs that that don't make sense, or that aren't as poetic as they would have been if they were in their native languages. I think that where the lack of the language rule shines is when it allows people to bring songs in languages they're deeply familiar with, whether that's an official language of their country or not, or whether that's a language of origin, for example, if they're an immigrant. I think that's where, like we saw in Holland's entry, in the Netherlands entry last year, that's where the lack of the language rule really shines. And that was a really exciting moment to see Tanchugueiras in the Benidorm Festival, and to see them do so well. No thanks to the jury, but to see this is a point of, I think, potential change, because I've been told by people who are more familiar with the matter, who have closer connections to Spain, that there is a lot of resistance, not just, I mean, it probably is primarily political resistance, isn't it? But it's not just the people in power who are resistant to language independence and regional independence in Spain. I'm no expert, but I've been told by people with closer connections to the country that there are, a lot of people who don't feel particularly happy about the emergence of these independence movements, or even just of linguistic autonomy movements, right? Linguistic revival movements, and it's kind of a mess. It's what I'm trying to get at. Like, TLDR, it's kind of a mess. But I think that what we saw this past weekend at Benidorm Festival was a glimpse of what it can look like if we kind of tip over into positive movements, support for regional languages at Eurovision, not just within the context of Spain, but in general. I can't even remember where we started now. With the dictatorship. Yeah, I think my main sort of thing, most of my thoughts are around language, because that's sort of where I know more. I think agree with everything that everything that you both have said, though, about the way that Eurovision is used politically. It's always been used politically. That's not stopping anytime soon. And there are real questions about what should and shouldn't be permitted in terms of suppression and oppression within the context of even something that seems so frivolous and but isn't at all, as a song that you select or the countries that are permitted to participate.
Being someone that's from Scotland, we do watch particularly. We've got a real interest in what is happening in Catalonia. It's something that people do talk about. I think they're also interested in what's happening here. So we've got the link. But the real question is, in terms of Eurovision entries, have over their 61 was when they joined, so over their 60 years, have we seen acts from Spain that is there a list of acts there that has truly represented every different part of Spain? Is that the case? If not, why not? But then for any other country at Eurovision, is that the case? Have we seen every kind of regional bit of Russia? Have they been included? So it could be said for every country in Eurovision, but it is an interesting point in terms of their wider Spanish music scene, which is kind of kicked off, really popular around the world. How does that reflect current day Spain? So I've just got loads of questions, but it's good to talk about.
Yeah, it seems like the ones I host tend to get a little bit politically charged, and I am sorry for that. Anyway, I guess another thing, I would love to see Galician or Catalan being heard in the contest, but I guess the same could be said about Scottish Gaelic or Welsh for the UK. I would love to see that happen. Do I think it will ever happen? No, I don't. I just don't think the BBC are brave enough to do it, but I wish they would be, because it would be a risk that could really pay off.
Just a sort of reasonably recent interesting discovery of mine has been a contest called Liet International, which is basically a Eurovision specifically for minority language artists. I actually discovered it when I was doing a fan contest, and I wanted to find a song in Romansh because I was trying to do a diverse Swiss national final. And I've actually discovered a whole lot of music in primarily, but not entirely, European minority languages. Music in various Sami languages, different Spanish languages, different Russian languages, various UK languages, and it's absolutely fascinating. So if people are interested in minority language music and representation, that would possibly be where I'd have a look, because it's really cool and really interesting. And I've discovered some really cool artists through having a bit of a play around with some of the entries.
Oh, I'm just going to come back and note that Miki, I mean, he's not the only one, right, who's from Catalonia, I'm sure, of Eurovision entries from Spain. But I want to bring him up because, I obviously just can't stop thinking about those bloody nonsense lyrics. My friend Fefi has a theory. I don't want to misrepresent her. Let's just say that we have wondered whether his lyrics are nonsense lyrics as kind of a dig at Castilian Spanish. Maybe not, maybe we're way off, right? But there is a question around why, an artist from Barcelona, who, I assume his first language is Catalan, maybe it's not, but I assume it is, wouldn't bring a Catalan song, a song in Catalan, right? But instead brought a song that literally doesn't make sense. I think it sounds great. Other people have disagreed and they're like, it hurts my brain because it doesn't make sense. I just think it sounds poetic and ambiguous enough. And part of me also thinks that might be because he took it to Tel Aviv, right? And maybe it was a protest song. La Venda is a blindfold. La Venda, La Cayó, the idea is the blindfold has dropped, and it's kind of, it's vague, but it is obviously about, there's a lot in there about self. You could apply it in so many ways. I guess that's what good poetic songwriting does. Whether it's good or not is obviously something that is highly debated. And I'm not even sure where I stand on it because I haven't been able to figure out what his intention was with it. Maybe it really is just a silly poetic song. Maybe it was a protest, but maybe it was a protest against Castellano. Like, that's just our little kind of bootleg theory over here. Like, tell us if you agree. Tell us if you think we're way off. If we're smoking something you want part of it. I just feel like I had to throw that in there because it's something we've like thought about a lot and we haven't come to a conclusion, honestly.
Like, you could even like take it to like, obviously Spain and Catalonia are quite like are disputed, so same as Israel and Palestine. You could even take it in that direction because he sang in Israel.
I can't stop thinking about how vocally he supported Hattari. Like, that's the thing I keep thinking about. And I know that he wasn't the only one. I know that like a lot of different artists, including the Israeli artist that year, like came up to them and like had a moment of saying, thank you for saying what you're saying. It's really important. Not all the artists did, right? But maybe it's just that Mickey comes off as super sincere, like particularly sincere. He really does. He's adorable, isn't he? But I just can't help but think, was it kind of the same thing, but what he was doing was just much more ambiguous, you know, and much more under the radar. But the thing is, I mean, if that's the case, maybe it really didn't work because I don't see anyone talking about it.
Maybe I think it's just one of those things that we're never going to know. And I think because he's such an innocent, sweet guy, he's never like going to come out and just like completely slam a country. If he is going to do it, he's going to do it in an ambiguous sort of way, which is totally okay. We are nearly wrapping up, but we are going to talk a little bit about the national final that happened over the last week, which was Benidorm Fest. I guess the best start is to just go very briefly into this because I think we will probably end up covering this on a live stream at some point. Just little thoughts on Chanel's song SloMo. How well could she do for Spain in the contest? And yeah, what are your thoughts on the new Spanish entry we got last night as of the time of recording?
I'm kind of wary on making any predictions on how this will do for Spain, given my history with Spanish entries and what I thought Lavender might do. But I do think she's a great choice. It wasn't my favourite song of the selection, and honestly, it's not really my style of music, but I think she's got the full package. She's got a great live performance. The staging is perfect. So please don't do what you did to Mickey and try and change it because it does not need it at all. The song is fun. I think it's going to be a really great song that will be catchy for people. I think it might get some good radio airtime, which is always good for a Eurovision song. I think people will like it. I think she's likable, and I think people will remember it when it comes to voting. So I think it's a really great choice for Spain. It's also fantastic to see some Cuban representation. I think Isabelle is possibly more able to speak about that than I am, so I'm going to let them do that. But it's so great seeing all of this sort of Spanish. It's not really diaspora, given Chanel was sort of born in Cuba and then moved to mainland Spain. But that sort of wider Spanish Hispanic culture getting that representation. And I know a lot of people have been saying comparisons to sort of the Cypriot entries of the last few years, but I feel like this is very much the genre coming from where that genre was born. And I think that is awesome.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. Chanel's song wasn't my favorite either, but to be fair, I would have been happy with really 4 or 5 of the finalists from the Benidorm Festival. It was so strong. I mean, for me, from my point of view, right? Like, yes, my favorite was Tanchugueras. I think you know, I think that you got that vibe from what I was saying earlier. I have such a soft spot for anything that's, you know, bringing such a strong representation of a folk, ethnically specific tradition. The song itself was a muñeira, which is like a Galician jig, basically. So I mean, it was so cool to see this like updated version of a Celtic cultural moment, you know, that I'm partial to a topless dancer. I'm partial to a drummer in a harness, what can I say? But none of that really can detract from just the strength and the power of their stage presence and of their vocals and of just the entire vibe of the song. The fact that it was in like just a number of marginalized Spanish languages, including Euskara, Basque, right? Like they brought Basque in there, they brought Catalan, Asturian, Galician. Like it just, I'm getting really giddy thinking about it. It could have been so special. And here's the thing that's interesting. I think that could have won Eurovision. And I might be being super optimistic because you know what? SHUM didn't win Eurovision, did it? And a lot of people have talked about Terra being like, you know, the Spanish SHUM, whatever that means. But you know what I mean? Like a very kind of catchy, exciting, dynamic, but very culturally specific moment in a language that most people don't speak or understand. I think that they've won even without winning, really. Like their video clocked up 100 million views, like almost overnight, I think, between the semis and the final, if I'm not getting that woefully wrong. That's what I read. I haven't fact checked that, but I know that the hype really, really built. The fact that they got both popular votes, that they won both popular votes is huge for a Galician band to win both popular votes, given what I was saying earlier about this uneasy relationship between Spanish people and their various marginalized languages. It's really positive. It's written, the juries always need a bit of time to catch up, don't they? You know, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a Benidorm festival down the line that has a more even split between jury demoscopic and popular vote. I also wouldn't be surprised, unfortunately, if we never saw that, you know, because of the way that, you know, that they do love to just really give the juries power, don't they? But about the winning song, I'm delighted. I'm really, really happy that we have Latin representation at Eurovision. I know I'm not the only one. My Latin friends are ecstatic. I already mentioned that there's a definite enclave of Eurovision support in Latin America. And that they're doing it, you know, they're out there supporting Eurovision despite the fact that it's often not broadcast live. There's often there's often geo-blocking issues. You know, it's like harder to support Eurovision from over there, and it's harder to support Spain, both logistically and also like psychically. What I get from my Latin friends is like this real sense of like an uneasy relationship with Spain. It's not a diaspora, it's a colonizer country. You know, and so we have all of Latin America, which is, I don't think it can even be counted as diaspora anymore, because it's so the relationship with Spain is so distanced, right? But there is still this relationship. It's like kind of this uneasy relationship with your older relatives that have like, you know, haven't exactly been great. So you're like their family, you kind of wish they weren't, but you do like. You kind of root for them, but you also enjoy it when they fail. Like there's this really weird sort of thing going on. And it's lovely to see that there were Latin American artists who felt positively enough about going to Spain and competing in the Benidorm Festival. I hope we see much more of that going forward. The fact that one won is just fantastic. She's the first, I think I'm not wrong in saying she's the first Latin competitor for Spain at Eurovision. Certainly in recent times. But I think I'm right in saying that, again, I'm so sorry for not fact checking this. I should have done. But I think Chanel might be the first Latin artist representing Spain at Eurovision. I think that's something that's been a long time coming. What's also been a long time coming is something Rosie touched on, which I'm constantly going on about. It pains me very much in my soul, the amount of nonsense Spanish we get in Eurovision. And like, sometimes it's fun, okay? Uno, right? From Little Big. Over in Russia, like that, it's so silly and like it's so obviously wrong, right? That's not how you count. The number 3 does exist, but then the thing that kind of pains me a bit more is things like Cyprus's entry in 2021, El Diablo, where Spanish is being used, and it often is, as like the spicy addition to a song, the thing to spice up a song. And I don't want to be too dramatic, but that does play into a damaging stereotype, right? That like to be Spanish is to be spicy, and, you know, and that it's just about being this party language. It's just about, I mean, literally are spice references. Like anytime Spanish turns up in a song, there are literal lyrics about spices. And then the thing that's also a bit uncomfortable is that they often just don't make sense. Like El Diablo doesn't make sense. I'm so sorry if you're an El Diablo stan, okay? I'm so sorry if you love it. It doesn't make any sense. And it's like to the point of being offensive. It's to the point that although it's an absolute banger, it's not on my playlist and it never will be, okay? I can't stand for it. It's just kind of, it's uncomfortable. And so I have been internally begging Spain to feel something that is a Spanish language club banger and school Cyprus and everybody else on how it's done. And I think that SloMo can do that. It reminds me both actually particularly the staging reminds me of Fuego. Like, I really think that it may just be that it's all derivative, but like the staging really is reminiscent of Fuego, but like in a good way. It's not a copy. It's just the way that she's like sort of, moving with the dancers. It's just, there's just that setup, that format is reminiscent of it. The fact that it's a Spanish language club banger. And look how well Fuego did, right? It'll be fascinating to see a few years down the line, are people hungry for something different? We didn't see the club bangers doing particularly well last year at all. So it'll be intriguing to see whether, and this is where I'm a bit tentative to be really excited about it. Here's my prediction. I think Chanel will crack the left-hand side of the scoreboard. I will be really surprised and I think offended if she doesn't, even having not seen all of the entries, right? Like already of what we've seen of what's being pitched. I think I'll be really surprised if she doesn't. She's so strong. And that particularly her final performance was so on point. Vocally strong. She's got this amazing stage presence and the choreography was spot on. It was really strong. It was really good. And it is hooky, it is catchy, it's fun. I don't think it'll do as well as Fuego did, right? I think it deserves to be recognized. I do think it deserves to be loved, but it will depend what else is in the mix, at Eurovision this year. There's still so much we don't know. I wonder whether people are hungry for something that's no longer the Spanish club banger moment. Then again, El Diablo was so loved, wasn't it? And it was nonsense. It was absolute fucking nonsense. But people absolutely adored it. So you know what? Maybe we're not over it. And exactly as Rosie said, we're getting a Latin-inspired club hit from the countries of origin, I should say. I'm delighted for her. I'm delighted she made it.
Oh, what a day to be an El Diablo fan. I like that song. I'm not a huge fan. I just wanted to say that. I think I need to tell you something just so you can get kind of where I'm coming from on this. So I did something last night that I've never done before. Don't worry. I listened to a Eurovision song that wasn't from the UK before Eurovision. I hadn't done that before since being a fan. I usually avoid the song, but I'd always done that. But in my role working for that Eurovision site and the Eurovision podcast, I gave it a listen, and I was ecstatic. I can say it. But first of all, I fell in love. Like I said earlier, I've got a huge crush on. I've got a huge crush on the act. I think they're in with a good shout. Now, seeing nothing else, I don't know what gives me the authority to say that. Comparing this to Spanish songs from before and echo a lot of what Isabelle had said, I think this is the Spanish sound that I've been looking for. They hosted the MTV European Music Awards a couple of years ago, and they had a lot of big acts performing there. And I was like, oh, why don't they send this to Eurovision? And at last they've sent something that's a Spanish sound that has been popular, is giving them hits around the world. And now they're going to bring something like that to Eurovision, which is incredibly exciting. If they can not muck up the performance, if they get a good draw, they're in the final, of course, because they're run by Papai. If they can get a good draw and it fits with what's around them, absolutely a good shout for the top 10. Everything goes right for them, and I'm really, really hoping it does. I think if they're going to go forward with this national final, and this is what it's producing, then surely they're on to a winner. So I'm saying already that this is a hit for me, and fair play to RTVE, the Spanish broadcaster. Credit where credit is due. They've not made a tit of this. It's been perfect. So I'm really excited to watch Eurovision and see what happens with Spain. I love that performance. If she keeps that outfit, that was great. Everything about it, I love, love, love. So well done, Spain. I'm really excited.
I am so excited for this. I feel like this is something that Eurofans have been waiting for Spain to try and do. I do have one apprehension about it, and I do wonder, is Europe bored of this already? And that is simply because Cyprus have sent 3 songs like this 3 contests in a row. However, this is a lot more authentic to the artist, a lot more authentic to Spain. This is a Latin American song from a Latin American artist. This should do well, and I hope it does do well, because Chanel has, she has the sass, she has the confidence, she can bring it on stage. I just hope that this gets Spain out of that bottom 5 rut that they have been in the last 5 years, because boy, do they need to come out of it.
Just a little addendum about that rut, right? I've talked with my Spanish speaking friends about how much Spain has a ballad problem. Like, it needed an intervention, and we've got that now. Like, we've had it. But there was a moment there during Benidorm Fest that it looked like we were going to get another fucking ballad. Like, I just want to quote my friend Flor again. This might not translate as well on audio as it does in text, but her comment on the final lineup in the Benidorm Fest final, given all of the lead up to it, was Spain, no more ballads. Spain 5 seconds later, okay, maybe 3 ballads. I'm just delighted that we didn't end up. I loved Blanca Paloma's moment. I thought that she gave a really beautiful, it's unfortunate that this wasn't a different year, in a way that there wasn't a hankering for that, because that would have been a Eurovision moment, I think, in a different year.
I feel like that type of ballad would have worked simply because it's so different to any of the type of ballads that Spain have been sending. They've been sending lovey-dovey songs. This was just beautiful and ethereal. That would have been such a different type of ballad that I almost feel like that would have been okay. If they'd have sent Gonzalo, I would have been right.
The fact that Gonzalo, and listen, I'm sorry to that man. I appreciate there must have been so hard for him to not be able to actually perform, not even in the heats, right? I mean, certainly not in the semi. He was out in the semi, and he out due to COVID in the semi, and out due to COVID in the he couldn't perform in the heat either. Yeah, the whole contest was just wiped out for him, and yet he managed to get to the final on the strength of a music video, right? Of just this sad lad in a black polo neck, right? Spain just loves its sad lads in black polo necks so much that Gonzalo was in the final on the strength of a music video of him just being sad in a sad way, just sad in a
sad boy way.
Oh, sorry, in a boy way. He seems like a lovely man. I think I literally said when they were giving the votes, if they send this, they deserve 0 points. If after all of what they gave us in Benidorm, after everything they gave us, right, there was even a different sad lad to choose, right, but just a jauntier one. I loved Raiden. I thought that, I'm yelling now because I'm so angry. I'm lovingly angry at Spain. I thought La Calle de la Llorería was fabulous. It's like a jaunty, upbeat, sad moment, right? But still, sad lads in black. If you were there, right there for the choosing, and yet Gonzalo was, the one that was up there as well. They just had to vote for all their sad lads. I was like, if Gonzalo wins, then they just deserve everything. Then they can just go on the bonfire. I've had it. It's over between us. But that didn't happen, and I'm so sorry, Gonzalo. I'm sure that, I hope that he gets another chance, to compete in earnest. Please don't attack me.
We won't. They won't attack you.
I'm so sorry. I'm just so fed up of. And again, Blast seems like genuinely a delightful chap. But I can't take it. I'm at capacity for sad lads. You know, Duncan Lawrence is the sad lad that is welcome in this house. We have no space for anymore.
Okay, right. So we still have our wrap up point to go, and we've been recording for 1 hour and 20 minutes. So very quick 2 sentences before we wrap up. Any changes we would make to Benidorm Fest? Go.
All I'd say is I'd quite like, if you're going to have that split of jury, demoscopic and televote, I'd like some more jurors, please, because I think 5 people with 10% each influence in the results is too much.
I agree with Rosie. I also think that on the whole, the way that they unfolded the votes was really fantastic in terms of building tension. Like, I thought it was so gloriously suspenseful. It was so gloriously suspenseful, but it was confusing. I think that more could have been done. And I mean, I'm a person who actually understands Spanish, so the fact that I found it confusing, I knew there were loads of people watching who were like, I don't know what's happening. They could have made it a little bit clearer. I think they did a good job given how complicated it was. I think they did a fairly good job of breaking it down, but I would like to see them maybe just make that a little bit clearer going forward. And I think that actually there was a bit of a problem with the fact that we knew that Tanchugueiras hadn't won as soon as we found out Chanel was in 3rd place, not 4th. We knew Tanchu hadn't won, and yet we still had to go through and receive the votes for Rigoberta and Tanchu. And that reminded me a lot of the the early Eurovision split jury televoting reveals, where it kind of it's a deflating moment. I think they didn't help that by they kept the camera on Rigoberta and Tanchugueiras. So like you had 2 acts that were both like, oh, well, we can't make it now. Like, we know that even with the maximum votes, which is what Tanchu ended up getting, we know we can't make it. But the camera stayed on them. I thought that was a really bad choice. So that's quite specific, because actually change nothing else. Well, except for what Rosie said. Either get more jurors or make it a 30% split, 33. But on the whole, super positive. Like, very excited. This is the way to go. It wouldn't surprise me if this is Spain on and up. Having said that, she's going to come last or something, isn't she? I'm just absolutely cursing this. But I mean, because for a lot of Eurovision viewers, all they see is what they see at Eurovision. They don't see Benidorm Festival. But what I took from it was, this is Spain on an upward trajectory, and I'm excited about it.
Whatever happens in Turin for Chantal, there'll be lessons learnt from that, whatever way it goes. If we can go into next year and be as excited, that is a win. That is a win for everybody. A strong Spain in Eurovision is what we want to see. So definitely, if we can go into next year with the amount of excitement, even more excitement, people in Spain getting fully involved in Eurovision and loving it, and building that audience up as well, and the reputation of the contest in Spain. That's what we're looking for. So like I said earlier, credit to RTVE. If they can keep this up, they can take away from Turin the lessons, whatever happens either way. And like we said earlier, if they could get more dialects in, let's get the different bits of Spain represented, that would be even better. Let's just put the whole of Spain on show, and that'll be exciting for everyone.
I think my point is a little bit controversial, and it's simply because I found it a little bit confusing with having 3 separate votes. Because usually I'm used to 2, like a jury and a televote, and sometimes it wasn't quite clear. Like, sometimes it's split into 4. I'd rather they just read from bottom to top rather than just say, oh, here's the top 4, and not read the bottom 2. I just found it a little bit confusing. I just think they should just read all the scores out, because it's so much easier to follow. Luckily, I didn't have to live tweet any of Spain, because if I had done, I'd have got some of it wrong for sure. And I think I would just expand on Rosie's point as well. I would probably have about 10 jurors, 5 international, 5 national. That may work a little bit better. I guess another small comment. I am against heads of delegation from other countries being on juries. To be fair, I don't think Felix is the type of head of delegation that would sabotage Spain, but I definitely think there are heads of delegation out there that would have done that. I'm just not a fan of it. I just don't think it should happen. But I know it's allowed, so I don't know if it's something that could be changed in Benidorm Fest, because I know he was on the Festival E Congress jury. I know he was on one Festival E Congress jury as well a few years back, so it's not the first time. Anyway, that just about takes us to the end of That Eurovision Podcast. I would like to thank Rosie, Stuart and Isabelle for joining me today. Please remember to follow us on all our social media at That Euro site on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, and to check out any other episodes of That Eurovision Podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We also upload our podcasts onto YouTube, so also check them out on there if you don't have access to streaming sites. And all that is left for us to say is adios.
Y hasta luego.
A la vista.
Bye.